Hi, everybody. I just want to welcome everybody and thank them so much for coming to my water magic workshop. I'm really excited to teach this workshop. I have a new book coming out with Llewellyn in the fall that people can pre-order now called Water Magic. Surprise! And you know, since I know that there's a very broad audience that we're looking at here, and there's so much that is encompassed by water magic, that we're going to talk a little bit about everything today. We're going to talk about tarot and water magic. We're going to talk about some crystals that you can use for water magic. We're going to talk about some altar setups that you can use for making a water altar or incorporating elements of water into your own altar or shrine practice. Maybe I'm going to tell you a little story. Some other stuff is going to happen, but I just want to thank everybody again for really coming and sitting here with me virtually for a little bit to talk about water and the magic of water. Just a little bit about how I got interested in this. The book was a labor of love. I was approached by Heather Green from Llewellyn, and she really wanted something that was a comprehensive look at all things that had to do with water and magic. And while I was really excited to write the book, I was a little skeptical as to why I should be the water magic person, because I'm an Aries. I have a Libra rising and a Libra moon. So there's a lot of fire and air going on there. You'll hear me talk. And sometimes you'll hear me rah, like the Aries that I am. But the more that I thought about it, to use a cliche, the more that I delved deeper into myself and what was going on with me, I sort of saw that there really was this undercurrent of water magic throughout my whole life. There was this sort of connection to the water and the magic of the water. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and now I live in New Orleans, two cities that are both really famous for their connection to the water and the water that's near them. And those places have always been so influential to me. For those of you who maybe have heard me speak before or listened to my blog, Voodoo Universe, or read one of my other books, you know that I'm a devotee of a few African traditional religions, namely New Orleans Voodoo, Haitian Vodou, and Lukumi, which people often misterm as Santeria. And in the La Regla Lukumi tradition, I'm a daughter of Oshun, and Oshun is the Ashe, or the sacred energy or spirit of the river. And in those traditions, who you are, who is your spiritual mother, that sort of informs your entire life. So there's a lot of stories that are really beautiful about Oshun and the river. And one of my favorite ones was that she had hard times. And I think we've all had hard times, financially. I know I certainly have. And she was forced to wash her clothes out every day in the river. And traditionally in Lukumi and a lot of the other ATRs, we wear ritual white clothes. And everybody knows what happens when you wash white clothes out in the river over and over again. Throughout time, they yellow. So in some of the Pataki's or ritual stories, it talks about how her color is yellow, and that's because she had to wash out these clothes and really understand the depths, again, pardon the pun, of her connection to the water and how it influenced her life, just as it influences the lives of all of her spiritual children today. So I guess there was a lot of reasons that I could be connected to water. I've done a lot of love magic. Some of you may have read my book, Love Magic. And, I've always been all about love magic. When I was preteen and a teen and I had crushes, I would pick up the tarot cards and try and find out what was happening and all those kind of newbie little, witchlet kind of things that you do, and a lot of that, the love magic, was connected to the water. So I'm going to get started. We're going to talk a little bit about these things. I want to start with tarot because I think that there are a lot of witches out there and magical people that use tarot and divination methods connected to water. Now, you can use water as a water blessing for your cards. Now, I'm not talking about soak your cards in water because they're cards and that's not going to be great for them. But if you have a space where you read, you can do something as simple as cast a magic circle with water around and some of the things that you can use to do that. I have some demo things here. Is Florida water. So for those of you who don't know, Florida water is not water from Florida. Florida water is a cologne or a perfume that has been used for a very long time. The brand I just showed has been in business since 1811, and I really like it. My grandmother used it my grandmothers on both sides used it, and my great-grandmother used it as sort of a blessing. I've seen people use it not just in African traditional religions, but use it in Sicilian culture or Peruvian culture or things like that from all across the world. So there's a lot of different applications for it. My own Priestess Miriam from the Voodoo Spiritual Temple here in New Orleans that I just moved to 2 weeks ago. She has her own Florida water, and here's that. And basically, both of these formulas, what they do is bless and protect and cleanse and all of those kinds of wonderful things that you want to do. You can find recipes for it online. I have recipes that I have seen out there, but for me, it's a lot easier to just get it already made. Because there's a lot of secret ingredients that I think go into a lot of these things, and especially now that some of the ingredients might be harder to find, I think that possibly going the commercial route might be easier for a lot of people. But there are other magical waters you can use, excuse me, to bless your cards. You can use holy water. This holy water comes from the Shrine of St. Jude here in New Orleans. And for those of you who are used to hoodoo and conjure magic that use saints and things of that nature, St. Jude is the patron saint of the impossible. So I like to use the holy water from that shrine here in New Orleans when I have situations that are really, really difficult and trying, and it looks like I would need some kind of miracle on every level in order for these things to manifest. So if you have something that prevents you, in whatever reason, from going and getting holy water from a Catholic church or some sort of Christian church, you can make your own holy water. I remember I did an event once where I took a bottle of spring water and I brought it to all the pagan and witch priests and priestesses that were at the event and asked them to bless it in their own special way. And that gave me my own kind of different occult magical water that was really powerful and that I used for a long time. When I do a blessing on water, you can do your own blessing on the water to make it magical and spiritual. Usually what I do is do an equal armed cross with the water. So to represent the crossroads and the transformational power of magic. And then what I do is throw it into the air, make sure it's closed. I throw it into the air gently and catch it again. And that represents both physically and spiritually, allowing it to go into the hands of the invisibles, as we call them in New Orleans Voodoo, the hands of the other realms, the hands of the things that we don't necessarily always see, but we know that is there. And I think that that's at the core of a lot of water magic, that there are things that we see in the water. There are things that we know is in the water, even if we can't see them. And there are things that we see, even if we don't know them, in the same way that we can know things that happen in our immediate non-water-based tangible world. What am I talking about? I'm talking about things like whales. Now, if you see a whale, you can't see the enormity of that whale unless you are in the water with it. That's just something we can't fathom unless we're close to it, because so much of that occurs in the watery depths. And when we think about it magically, there are so many things that are attached to water in these ways. So I think that that's really powerful way to just sort of conceive of water magic. Now, what else can you use? You can use rainwater. That will give an element of transformation if you're using that to sprinkle around. A lot of witches that I know like to gather rain in May, because May is said to be the time of Beltane, Beltane, the shifting of the year, the shifting of the tides, the shifting of the balance of the year from Samhain to Beltane. And at that point, things are about opening up and newness and sort of the side of the year where things become more in the light. So if you're trying to do manifestation work or things like that, then using water gathered at that time is most advantageous to you right now. I have a friend of mine, Phoenix Coffin Williams, who is a priest, and lately, because of all the unrest that's been happening, he's been going out and gathering war water. And I think the rainwater that we gather at particularly poignant times, both astrologically, politically, physically, emotional times in our own life, also allows us to utilize the power and the ashe and the energy that's manifesting during these events. Similarly, you could go out and collect water from somewhere that you'd been that was special to you. Now, that could be river water. As I mentioned, rivers are sacred to the Orisha Ochun. Rivers are sacred to several other gods and goddesses and things like that. So if you're doing a working for those energies at the water, by all means, leave an offering. Ask if it's okay to take some water. Do some divination, maybe with your dowsing rods or your pendulum or your cards, and see if the answer is yes. You're allowed to take some water and leave an offering in exchange for that. And then you can bring that water home and use that in your magic. As I mentioned, I like using waterfall water. That has to do with transformation. And one of the, I think, really nice things that writing water magic allowed me to do was to truly explore, even if only on paper, because now travel is limited, some of the sacred sites that relate to water. I have never gone to Sadal in Haiti, but there is a sacred waterfall in Haiti where in July people travel to for ritual cleansings and a connection to the Loas there. And I think that that's something really beautiful. There are also sacred sites that other people might be more familiar with. I'm a big fan of Twin Peaks, and I wanted to go to the waterfall that is represented in the opening of Twin Peaks. I believe it's Snoqualmie Falls. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, but there's a lot of really beautiful native indigenous legends around the area about maidens that are in the falls. I also talk a lot about Niagara Falls. In the book, I have done a lot of work with Witch Doctor Utu and the Dragon Ritual Drummers, who are located next to on the Canada side, next to Niagara Falls, and just some of, again, the indigenous and native legends and stories that come to us from there. So that I met a Peruvian person, and I talk a lot about the sacred Peruvian water and wells and springs there. I met one the other night, and that was an interesting conversation. So I think that, you know, we get magic from things that we can create, like I've just mentioned, like a formula like Florida water, and we also get water magic from the sacred sites where the water is. If you go to Ireland and you go to one of the sacred wells of Breege, of which there are many, you can, again, in the same way that I've mentioned, leave an offering and ask if humbly and respectfully if it is okay to share in the ashe and the energy of that space. One of the things too, I'm definitely an urban witch. I mentioned Brooklyn and New Orleans. One of the things that I think it's important to at least be mindful of when you are traveling or when you are collecting sacred waters is, you know, maybe you'll be somewhere, check where the water supply is. You know, is your water coming from the local river? Is it coming from the local falls? Is it coming from underground springs in the area? Each one of these things will have its own special character. And when you turn on the faucet to gather water for your scrying bowl or water to bless your hands before you touch your tarot cards or before you do any kind of ritual or divination, that contains both the spirit of place and it contains the magic of wherever that water actually came from. So it's something that it's like magic you didn't even know was there when you were checking it out. So I think that's like a little bonus or a twofer that you get when you're gathering water. You know, it doesn't have to be all fancy smancy. I don't have to travel to the top of a mountain in Tibet, which a dear friend of mine did, and I write about it in the book, but his experience with the sacred waters and sacred cleansings that happen there. But if you can, that's wonderful. But, you know, not everybody's going to be able to do that. So we work with what we have sometimes until we can work with other things. And for me, it was always very comforting to know that I had that water that had the spirit of place as near or as close as my own faucet. Now, we can use these things to bless our cards, like I mentioned. You know, there's a lot of tarot cards that deal with water. Unfortunately, I don't have the time today to get into all the nuances and the details of all the different cards out there, but obviously the Suit of Cups, when we're talking about tarot, is the most connected to water, is the most representative of the element of water when we're speaking of doing elemental kinds of magic and elemental workings. Each one of these will mean something slightly different. If we look at the Ace of Cups, which I pulled an Ace of Cups out for you here before I got ready today, I have two different images of the Ace of Cups going on here. I don't know if you can see that. Maybe you can see them a little bit. I'll put them on the side of my head so I look like Crowley. Just kidding. We talk about the Ace of Cups, and people see that as representing the Holy Grail. They see that as representing the sacred chalice, the first manifestations, beginnings of water. And in legends back as far as it was supposed to be the cup that Jesus Christ took his last sip from at the Last Supper, or if we want to move away from Christianity, it's in Arthurian legend, which I suppose still has some Christianity in it, but it's has to do with giving eternal life, eternal youth, in the sense of Ponce de Leon and the Fountain of Youth, this kind of thing where we can drink of the chalice and be rejuvenated. And people who are familiar with traditional witchcraft will recognize that water is usually present on the altar in the symbol of a chalice and sacred water. Now, again, you could fill this chalice with the tap water that would have spirit of place. You could fill it with any of the other sacred waters that I was mentioning. So just again, I think it's really helpful personally for me, and also for my students that I've had for several years, to be mindful of where these waters are coming from and things like that. I will mention this since I didn't say it. This is from the Wild Unknown Tarot, and this is from the New Orleans Voodoo Tarot, both of which I use quite frequently. I'm also in a couple of decks, so if people want to check that out and see me jazzing it up on a deck, they can search that out there. But there are other ways too to incorporate water. Obviously, scrying is something that's used a lot in water magic. Now, you can scry in a bowl of water. They even make special stuff called black water that is colored and by minerals and other things, and it allows for a more reflective surface, because again, what we're doing when we're scrying water is gazing into water and on some level really intuiting what's happening with the water and what we can see, sort of, again, this veil between the worlds, this land of the invisibles. Water allows us to see beyond where we are and see beyond what's right in front of us in the physical world. And this is something that's echoed in sacred wells throughout time, which I cover a lot about in the book. But you can make your own with a bowl, hopefully something earthenware, hopefully something reflective, but I'm not going to give you a bunch of dictates and say it has to be done this way, because water is very fluid. So everybody's going to have their own way of scrying with water. Now, this could be something simple, like I said, with a bowl, or maybe scrying doesn't work for you. I know I tried for years to scry, and it's always been very difficult for me. But if I pick up a set of dowsing rods, as I mentioned, I just moved, so I can't find mine. But if I pick up a set of dowsing rods, those things will move for me like nobody's business. So for me, dowsing rods, which were traditionally used to find water, and also as methods of, or find lost things, and also as methods for divination, work really well for me. So on that level, I can take water magic and water divination and use it in a different context, even if scrying straight up is not the way that's going to be easiest for me. Everybody's going to have their own strengths and things like that attach to water magic. What else did I want to talk a little bit about today? Really quickly, I wanted to talk about some of the stones that are associated with water. Turquoise is one that comes to mind. It comes from the word Turkish. I'm wearing turquoise. I think magically that if you want to get a piece of jewelry or an altar item that has a water stone in it, that can be really helpful to you in bringing that energy into your life. It could be something that mimics your character, or it could be something that you really need. Turquoise is something that's for healing. I think that as particularly emotional healing. So I think if there's people that have issues with love and stuff like that, they might want to consider getting a piece of jewelry that had turquoise in it, or maybe taking a piece of turquoise and sleeping with that under their pillow to help them with emotional healing during their dream work, to help them with joy and happiness. These are other characteristics that come along with turquoise. Or maybe you're just using turquoise to try and connect with some of the deities that use turquoise. Rose quartz is another favorite one of mine. Rose quartz has a lot to do with love, healing, and connection and things like that. So that's really beautiful to me that we can use those kinds of water things to connect. You know, when you set up your water altar, now you can have a tarot altar, or you can have an altar that's specifically dedicated to water, or you could have a shrine that's permanent. That's the distinction between those two. That is traditionally dedicated to water. So all of these things together, you know, you can use, and you're going to need something to represent the earth element. That could be herbs and things like that. Bay leaves are used with water. It could be stones, as I just mentioned, like rose quartz. You can have actual water on there. You can have a blue candle, which the color blue represents water. You can have air incense that might be in a scent that's, you know, conducive to water. It might be an astrological scent or things like that. But I know this is a lot of information and I talk really fast. So I just want to thank everybody again. I know there are going to be lots of questions. You know, there's a lot more things that I would have loved to have covered today. Things like shells. These are another really great thing to put on your altar. If we look at something like the cowrie shell, that's been used for thousands of years. It was a symbol of femininity, a symbol of fertility, a symbol of prosperity, even to the extent that cowrie shells were one of the first things that were used for money and exchange without any kind of, you know, other meaning attached to it. If we look at African traditional religions, like the tradition of Ifa, people do readings with cowrie shells. So these shells have the knowledge of the depths, they have the knowledge of the otherworldly, they have the knowledge of things that are beyond where we are, which, as I mentioned, is a theme that we keep coming back to over and over again when we're looking at water magic. And if there was anything else I just wanted to sort of close with and things like that, I just want to say that, you know, you can incorporate water into your life and your magic in so many different ways. You can put sacred water in your bathtub. You can use sacred water to make a floor wash, which is one of my favorite things to do, where you can add a little bit of Florida water or add some bay leaves when you're cleansing your house to add protection and blessings and possibility to all levels of your magic. And then it's there for a while. It's not just like, oh, well, I use 2 drops on the altar and that's that. If you do it as a floor wash, it can cover the entire house. You can do your windows, so everything that comes in is blessed and bounteous. You can do your doors, so everyone who walks in is blessed and protected while they're in your home. So I think for me, the beauty of writing this book was that it just unlocked so much of the possibility of how our bodies are made of water, the planet we live on is made of water, and things are able to sort of seek its level, as I said in the video for this workshop, that water will find its way into your life. You know, when I was working on the promo video, I was trying to figure out exactly what I wanted to say, and then my backyard flooded. So my backyard's fine. People don't have to put that in the comments. It receded, seek its level again. But, you know, we find ourselves in water. We find ourselves filled with water, and we look to water during those times to help us with our emotions and our feelings and all those things that are blessed and protected by water. So I'm going to open it up to questions, and I guess people will let me know what they have to say, and I will do my best to answer it in a kind and watery way. Hello, everybody. Is there anything anybody wants to know? I'm going to drink some water. I put it in a blue paper towel. I got a hello from, okay. Elizabeth asked in the chat, how can people practice water magic where it does not rain a lot? There are no bodies of water near them? Okay, so let's see. I mean, you can order water online. So that's the first thing. I mean, obviously, if you're in a desert or something like that, it's going to be much harder to get water, and it's going to be much harder to sort of have that kind of thing like ocean water or seawater. Now, if you had a spell or something that called for seawater, and you tried putting out a call on social media to get somebody to send you some, or get one of your friends to bring you some, and it didn't work, you could make your own again. You could take some sea salt, which is natural in seawater, and you could add that to your own tap water. And therefore you're creating something that is energetically similar, no, not the same, energetically similar to seawater. But I think part of the magic is also that, it helps to be creative, and it helps to think of these things. People like to bring me water from all over the world, and I save those waters and I save those things. And then when someone comes into my life, maybe I don't even need it, but when someone comes into my life and they need it, then I have it. Okay, Patty is asking me, hi Lilith, has your magic enhanced since you moved to NOLA? I feel like it's always been my second home anyway, and it has been much more intense, and it has been much more beautiful. I lived in New England very, very briefly, and I had a large yard, and I think magically I'm just so happy to be able to have a yard again, even if it's underwater sometimes. And my connection to, the river and Marie Laveau and to the people here has always been really strong. So part of me still keeps thinking it's just temporary, but I know it's permanent, and I'm so happy about that. Okay, somebody says, are there different kinds of water scrying? Yeah, there are definitely different kinds of water scrying. Everything is going to affect that kind of thing. There's things where you can give it a different intent. That will give it a different character. Say you were going to sit down and scry for love, then that would be something very different. The time of year and the moon phase is definitely going to make it very different. If you're scrying during a new moon, that's going to be very different than what you're going to find out if you're scrying during a full moon, and this is going to be something that's individual for different times. Okay, so, oh, people like the chair. This was a gift from my goddaughter. It's my throne chair. So thank you, Jennifer Metzenbauer, for liking the chair. Can we bless the water with a visualization if we live in a drier area? Question from Gwen. Yes, you can. Again, like I said, it's going to be trial and error for you. I know if needs must. So sometimes you have to come and, just get whatever you can and use whatever you can. But I would test it out. And I think this is something that I'm not trying to be whatever about it, but magic, like everything else, if you've never done it before, you need to try it out a couple of times, see if it works for you. Different kinds as in not just a bowl of water. Okay. Ray says, I meant different kinds as in not just a bowl of water. Sure. You can scry in different liquids. You can scry in different vessels besides bowls. You can scry, in lots of different things. Okay, Kyla says, you mentioned the earth and air elements, obviously water, but what about the fire and spirit elements? Should they be on a water altar too? Okay, maybe I glitched out for that part. I apologize for anyone who missed that. Normally what I do for the fire element is I will take a bowl and I will put a blue candle inside of it, and I will fill that bowl with whatever kind of magical water that I have. A blue candle, blue representing the element of water, and then also the water in the bottom of the holder is representative of the element. When I talk about using air, either I will get a ready-made commercial preparation that is in one of the astrological signs that relate to water. So, depending on what the situation is, either Pisces or Cancer or Scorpio, depending on what the working is, or I will use an incense that's something that is a water herb. For example, as I mentioned, there's different kinds of water herbs that you can use, like bay. And so, if you want to burn some bay leaves, then that will work. Special blessing for drinking water. Sorry, let's go back up so I can see who asked me that. Now it doesn't want to go back up. Debbie said, do you have a special blessing for drinking water? It's the same blessing that I showed you before. I make the equal armed cross for it, and then I throw it up gently in the air. You could do other things with it in the sense of, if you wanted to impart healing, you could make an altar with rose quartz and other healing waters and put your drinking water in the center of that, leave it there overnight, and then drink it in the morning. So that would work to sort of charge it up overnight. Let's see. Yay. Patty says, I live in the desert, but near Lake Mead, so it might be great to collect the water from there. Yes, I definitely think that. I think I'm all about these spiritual journeys, especially if it's close. I know it's hard for people to travel, especially now, to different areas and things like that. But, having this kind of spiritual pilgrimage, which is something that we don't really talk about in witchcraft and paganism. But I think that spiritual pilgrimages are very important. And sometimes it's just the next town over is our spiritual pilgrimage. And sometimes it's, as I mentioned with my friend, going to, the mountains in the top of Tibet and Nepal, that it can be, halfway around the world. Let's see, do we have any other questions here as I get ready to sign off? It was so quick. I'm so happy. Thank you from Brooklyn. I know, represent my old hometown. Blessings for water. Catherine asks, what blessing would you use for water inside the body? I would make a sacred circle around my bed with the different elements that I mentioned that would be placed in the water altar, or I would do something simple like put a rose quartz crystal under the bed for when you sleep, because you're going to spend the most time of day in your bed. Whether it's, you sleep for 6 hours or you sleep for 8 hours, either way, your body is in that space longer than any other place. I also would, as I mentioned, try maybe getting some jewelry. You can make a, herbal mixture and put that in your pocket to carry with you throughout the day. Oh, I like this. Barbara Banshee says, we've had people who've come to ritual events bring us water from where they live, and we call it the water of the worlds. That's beautiful. I love that. Water of the worlds. Okay, does your book, Christopher Z says, does your book talk about the connection between water, rivers particularly, and the underworld? Yes, it does. There's a huge connection between water and the underworld, or water and death. Now, one of the things that the book contains is as much as possible in-depth accounting of all the different water deities, gods, goddesses, and also the different animals, both physical animals and mythological animals. So a lot of those are connected to the underworld. And I talk about how some of the legends and stories that come to us from different traditions talking about the connection to water and the underworld. Okay, April says, really enjoyed your presentation. Aloha. Aloha to you too. And thank you so much, everybody, for ordering the book. I think I am at time, so I'm going to wrap up right now. You can pre-order the book. Please do. You can find me on my blog, Voodoo Universe. You can find me on my website, lilithdorsey.com, if you want to talk more about this or get a reading or anything like that. I would really appreciate it. And stay safe and stay wonderful, everybody.